Welcome back to Close Mode. I'm Dan Sanchez, and today I have a treat for you because we got to interview Jim Dickey, who is a veteran of sales leadership and enterprise sales. He's sold multiple companies, has been an executive multiple times, and has been doing extensive research on the topic of sales. And now we got to sit down with him, Brian and I, to talk to him about the 4 predictions that he's kind of seeing for the next year and the next couple of years into enterprise sales. Some of the topics we talk about are navigating uncertainty, how the sales cycle must support the customer life cycle, the new role of the sales manager, and how AI is changing the sales landscape. So let's jump into this episode.
Hey, Jim, we've talked a lot lately, and you keep mentioning uncertainty in the marketplace, especially as it relates to enterprise selling. So can you elaborate on that a little bit? What are you seeing in 2023 and 2024? How would you define that uncertainty?
I think, Brian, the key thing is we live in a frail ecosystem in sales. So there's always change. And so I think the key thing on it is it's okay for there to be change. It's not okay for there to be sustainable change if it's negative. It's okay if it's positive. But, when we went into 2023, everybody said, hey, there's uncertainty in the marketplace. We don't know what's going to happen in the economy. We don't know what's going to happen with the Fed. All these things are out there. So really 2 things happened. People set their numbers for what their expectation was for salespeople to achieve. And then they either said, okay, well, we're not going to budget as much to support you because we got to cut budgets everywhere, or we're going to budget the money, but we're not going to write checks out until we know checks are coming in. And so we went into that, and because of that, we saw really bad performance this year. Our latest study just came out on sales performance scorecard, 425 companies worldwide. And when we took a look at percentage of reps making quota, came in at 53%. That's near the all-time low. So that tells you in face of uncertainty, sales performance falls off. But here's the thing that's unique. In the 29 years we've been doing primary research, we're looking at 2 back-to-back years of uncertainty because still nobody can tell me what's going to happen with interest rates. Nobody can tell me what's going to happen with the recession. Are we going to have one? If so, how severe? How long? Nobody can tell me what's going to happen in the political climate in the United States or any place else in the world right now. So as we go into that uncertainty, what are we going to do to help our salespeople hit their numbers? January 2nd, at least in the US, most people are going to get an email. It's going to say, Dear Jim, here's your number for the 2024. Good luck. And wouldn't it be great if I got a second email that said, here's how you're going to hit your number? I don't know where that second email is coming from in most companies.
So you mentioned win rate. What are the other sort of business impact for sales leaders of that uncertainty? Where else are you seeing that?
I think the uncertainty comes in a couple different things. I think the uncertainty is people like working in a predictable environment. And so we had a client recently ask us to go back and take a look at the data from studies that we did in 2008 and 2010. So the last time we had an economic downturn. So, we had, 2008, everything fell apart at the end of the year. 2009 was really, really hard. 2010 was recovery. But in 2010, we saw an interesting thing. Voluntary turnover doubled. And so the question nobody was asking in 2009 is, are the sales reps that are here with me today, are they here because of what we're doing for them in uncertain times, or are they here in spite of what we're doing to them? And they found out it was the latter, because in 2010, companies started hiring net new reps. Your best reps got calls from recruiters and they said, get me out of here.
Yeah.
And so it was like all of a sudden now you got bit twice because you got bit by the economic downturn, but then your best performers left and you replaced them. And even if you replaced them with a good rep, that person was still going to take 6, 9, 12 months to get up to full speed.
Yep.
So that's a huge negative impact that we got to start figuring out right now is, do sales leaders understand what could happen in 2025 if they don't support their people in 2024?
Yeah. So what is there? Is there anything that's certain for next year?
Yeah, we have to hit our numbers.
Yeah.
It's not like the board's going to say, hey, I know it's tough, you got to pass. No, you already gave them the number. It's what are you going to do to help them hit it?
Yeah.
Win rate of forecast deals this last year for 2023 came in at 47%. I joke about the fact if you and I jumped on a plane and we flew out to Vegas and we went to the craps tables and we made a pass bet, our odds are 49%. When the odds of winning a craps are better than closing a forecast that, by the way, we created, that's not a sales management level discussion. That's a boardroom level discussion.
Yes. Yeah. So, all right. So, all of that's a little frightening. So, as we try to look into the future, what would you say are the top five predictions for enterprise sales leaders for next year?
Well, I think the first one we've already dealt with is the uncertainty is clearly the first thing that we've got to start understanding is, how do we bring more certainty in the environment? And are there things that we could be doing to bring more visibility into what's going on with our buyers, what's going on with our, the decisions they're trying to make, et cetera. So I think the uncertainty is there. I think the other certainty is in sales. Number two is you cannot cut your way to success. In tough times, I appreciate the fact that when the economy turns sour, the CFO in every company views her or his job as becoming not the CFO, but the CF no.
Right.
So I want to do this. No. How about this? No. How about this? No. And I get it. Their whole thing is I got to be the steward of the money that we have. And again, I will write checks out when I know checks are coming in. But the key thing in sales is, you can cut other ways, but I can show you year after year after year of data that when you under support the organization, you are writing an invisible check every time. What you're writing is that the average deal size gets smaller in uncertain times because buyers don't want to write big checks, or purchases get delayed, no decision rates go up because they say, do we really need to do this now? Couldn't we wait until 2025 and hold off on this thing? You see that sales cycles take longer. You see more people involved. That you've got to go out and deal with their agenda items if you're going to get them to say yes when you're negotiating a contract. So I think there are a lot of things right now that just sit there and say, when selling becomes tougher, you need to invest in sales.
If you're sitting here listening to this as a sales leader, part of you is like nodding your head. You're like, I knew it. I knew it. I knew if I cut things were going to get harder, but they were telling me the opposite. What's a sales leader to do in that place? I mean, how do they lead in uncertainty, especially trying to make justifications to their team that they have to keep investing? How do they win that case?
I think there's a couple things. As I mentioned, we just published our 2023 sales performance scorecard study. And we took a look at companies based on the level of process that they use to engage customers, from totally ad hoc, everybody does their own thing, to what's emerging now as a fifth level process we've never seen before, which is customized process. It's utilizing AI so that we go in and we customize the way we deal with each customer, and in fact, each way we deal with each opportunity with each customer. And I think that's giving us a level of insights. The second thing it takes a look at is the level of relationship you have with your customer. From, hey, at the very bottom of the thing, I'm one of many approved vendors. I'm nothing special, but hey, you can buy from me. Two, I'm up there as a trusted co-creator of solutions with my customers. And as the study found, as you move from, if you put that in a 5x5 matrix process on the horizontal, relationship on the vertical, if you move from lower left to upper right, everything gets better. Percentage of reps making quota goes up. Percentage of overall plan attainment goes up. Win rates go up. Why? Because competitive losses go down and so do no decisions. And by the way, turnover dramatically goes down because the salespeople like living and working in a predictable environment. So I think first off, starting to share that information with the CFO and the CEO and just sit there and say, again, this is getting back to the invisible checks. You're telling me to cut the budget by 5%, but if we do, the invisible check budget's going to go up by 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to
I've
write
worked a lot.
huge checks that you're not aware of, and I want you to be aware of those checks. I want you to know the size of those, because the size of those checks can be orders of magnitude more than the size of the check I'm asking you to write to support the sales
I love
organization.
that notion of invisible checks. And the first time you brought that up is you and I were talking about the HBR article that said the average American company spends $98 million a year on end of quarter discounts. Right. That was the
Yes.
first time I heard you say that. And that's a massive invisible check, right?
I was going to say, I've worked with a lot of CFOs, and I know I can predict what their first question is going to be after you say this to them. It's kind of like, show me some empirical evidence, right?
Yeah.
Where is there research out there where you can go, the people can source and be like, here it is, Sir
Yeah,
CFO.
that's what I was just mentioning the report, because the report's 50 pages and it goes in depth into these things, but we actually map the performance of what are the key performance indicators for people in the lower left, in the middle of the matrix, and in the upper right. And so we've got data, and it's the most current data you've got right now because we've just gathered this. And it's showing you in tough times, here's what the performance difference is, and it's off the charts.
So moving into the next prediction, what are you foreseeing in the future for sales leaders?
The third prediction really comes from the buyers themselves, and it's not a prediction; it's a stated fact. They're telling us that the buy cycle is changing, and they're even telling us how it's changing, and they're even telling us what they want us to do about the fact that it's changing. And I don't know that we're listening really, really well. We published an analysis with Korn Ferry where we took a look at 500 B2B buyers. And this was a repeat of a study we did in 2018. And so we're looking at buyers. Now, these are not people in purchasing and procurement. These are executives making 6, 7, 8-figure decisions. And so we went out and we started asking them, when are you engaging with sellers? You've had people like Challenger talking about this for years, saying, buying is happening without sellers being involved. And you're getting back to your point, where's the empirical data? Well, we got it. And we got it in 2018, and they sat there and they came back, and I think the number was 56% of the companies said that we're engaging with sellers at either the first or second step in our buy cycle. First step in the buy cycle, when I'm first starting to envision what my problem is. Second step is when I'm trying to envision what the solution might look like. That number went from 56% to 43% when we repeated the study. So that's saying that's heading in the wrong direction. And then we just said, okay, is there anything that would make you engage buyers earlier in the process? And in the initial study in 2018, 9% of the people said there's nothing, which meant 91% of people said there is something. But when we repeated the study, 25% of the people said there's nothing. So again, headed in the wrong direction. But then we asked the 75% that said there is something, we said, what is it? And they told us. And they said it fell into 3 buckets. The first one is, if this is new to me, and I perceive that you could help educate me on how to maximize my upside and minimize my downside, I will bring you in as a consulting resource to me. The second was, if this is risky, and risk came in 2 flavors. If this is risky to me personally, like if this initiative doesn't go off right, I get fired, or if it's risky to the organization, then I will bring you in if I perceive that you could help eliminate or at least mitigate risk. And the third is, if this is complex. If this is something that I can't pull off on my own, I've got to go out and get other functional areas within my company to buy into this initiative and support it, or even resources outside of my company. Think of a jet engine or a jet manufacturer, like Boeing. They're going to go get jet engines from GE. So I've got to get GE to buy into some of these initiatives too. And so they said, so if you could help me build consensus and build buy-in and build support from all the other stakeholders, I will bring you in. Those are nothing to do with the product per se. They're value add. And I think that's what buyers are looking for, is what else can you bring to the table besides the product you sell? And I think that's the thing we've got to start being aware of. The sell cycle here is here for one reason and one reason only. It's here to support the buy cycle. Because we can do everything in the sell cycle except for one thing. We cannot legally sign the contract for the customers. They got to sign it themselves. So we've got to get them to the point where we get down to the final negotiations, and go in there and not be sitting across the desk from each other, haggling over price. We got to be sitting on the same side of the desk, figuring out how we solve real business problems, how we mitigate risk, how we build consensus for this thing to be successful, not just out of the chute, but for years to come. And I think that's something that sales management's got to realize that, am I listening to my buyer? Am I really getting in there and trying to figure out what they want and what they'll value from me, and how do I differentiate myself from everybody else?
So the sales cycle is changing, and you're dropping bombs over here, like real wisdom of like, these are the three ways sales reps can engage with them early instead of waiting for them to come at the very back end. If they're coming at the back end, we're losing a lot of opportunities to influence their buying cycle. But what I'm hearing you saying is that we really need to persuade them. We need to serve them in these three ways. And you talked about by being a helpful consultant, by helping them reduce risk, and by helping them navigate complexity as the three ways that sellers can engage and serve buyers early in a way that can reduce the overall win rate down the stage. Is that right?
I think, Dan, the key word you just used was early. I think a lot of times we sit there and you take a look at the early stages of the sales process. We're going product, 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 feature, 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 product, feature, product, feature. And then at the very end, we get to value add. And so, no, let's bring up all these things early on so that when we bring up a feature, we bring up the value add that it does, and we start instilling that in their mindset up front. I always told my salespeople, I ran sales organizations for the 3 software companies that I co-founded. I said, I want the close to be the worst kept secret that there ever was. I want everybody to know what we're delivering, why we're delivering it, the value it's going to deliver, why the price is the way the price is, what the implementation plan is going to be. I want all of that to be so well known and ingrained that everybody says, oh, well, there's no surprises here.
Yeah.
Now, that's in a
So
perfect world, but I think the key thing on that is to just go through and say, yeah, we should be having a strategy. There was the ABC of selling when I joined IBM a million years ago. Always be closing. Well, yeah. You should be thinking about the close from day one when you make that first qualifying call. And that should be, do I even want the deal? How many of us have sales reps out there right now working really, really hard to close deals we don't want? They're not going to be profitable. We're not going to meet the buyer's expectations. I mean, there are a whole lot of things. So I think changing kind of that mindset on, how we're looking at sales, to sit there and say that this is a process of building the meeting of the minds, and it starts on day one.
So, Jim, I know you've had a lot of experience with AI before, and I remember hearing you on another podcast saying that AI is actually real this time. AI is actually come. Can you give us some background on your experience with AI in sales and what you think is different now?
Well, to give you an idea on my background in AI, I actually did my first AI projects back in the 80s using algorithms from the 50s, and both projects were total failures. Because the hardware wasn't there, software wasn't there, data wasn't there, and we really didn't know what we were doing at that point in time. About 6 years ago, we started going out and surveying companies who were implementing AI as part of their sales stack. And initially, I came up with 26 companies that convinced me they had an AI component as part of their sales optimization solution. Today, that number is over 400. But while there's a lot of people out there, the real question is it doing anything? And this is really what I think, our prediction for, fourth prediction is just talking about the fact that AI is real this time. People are doing real things with it, and the experience of the people who are the early adopters of AI is something that everybody else needs to know about. Because as part of the study, what we did was we took a look at 3 different cohorts. People who have actually implemented AI in their sales organizations, which is the vast minority. People who are interested enough to at least be evaluating it, which is a growing number of companies. And then people who have no interest today, which is the vast majority out there. And the key thing on it is when we asked the people that had implemented it, the question, what do you think the impact of AI is going to be on sales in 3 years? 91.5% said it's either a game changer or it's a critical addition to the tools that salespeople will be using. 91.5%. So we never saw that with CRM. If you ask people in the early days of CRM, hey, what's CRM doing for you? It's pain in the butt type of stuff. So all of a sudden you've got 91.5% who are using it, see it as something really, really key to the sales going forward. When we asked the people who had no interest, 25% came back and said, I don't have enough information to even give you a guess. Another 25% came back and said, we can get by without it. And I go, okay, well, we got a mix up here. People who really have experience have got a whole different feel than you do. So I think that as we go on out, we're starting to see AI is actually changing how companies are selling. And I don't care if you decide not to implement AI for sales. What I care is if you have that as an uninformed decision. Because what we're seeing right now is the people who are actually doing it are saying, hey, we're just seeing stuff we've never seen before. And so you can maybe decide, hey, I'd rather hire another 20 sales guys, or I'd rather go back and optimize our marketing programs and spend money there. But you better know what you're giving up. Because AI is helping people close deals that they've never closed before, close bigger deals, close them at higher margins. And I think that's the real thing. As we go into 2024, we've got to figure out how are we going to go back and do a better job of helping our salespeople hit our numbers. And I think technology is going to be a very important part of that solution for next year and certainly for the years after that.
And Jim, what if you were to talk about maybe drop down one level to you talk about how important it is. What are the 2 or 3 things that it's doing right now that are helping people close better deals?
There are 2 things. When we ask people before on traditional CRM, what are the top benefits you're seeing? They'd come back and say, it's reducing the admin burden on my salespeople. It's improving communications between reps and managers. Managers can go into the system and see what the reps sort of doing. And it's streamlining the forecast process. Now, notice I use the word streamlining. It's not improving the forecast process because win rate of forecast deals is still really low. But those are nice things, but they're efficiency things. And so what it's doing is it was giving me more time to make more average sales calls. And today, I need more time to make great sales calls. And so that's really where AI is coming in because it's giving me information to use with my prospect. It's giving me insights to share with them above and beyond what the features of the product are. It's also giving my managers insights into what's going on with me and how they can better help me. So it's actually increasing effectiveness. So what we saw was when we asked people who had implemented AI for sales, what are the operational benefits they're saying? They're still saying, yeah, it's giving me more time, but they're saying it's increasing win rates. It's increasing margins. It's increasing my ability to convert leads to first calls to presentations, all the way through the entire sales process. So it's really a combination of efficiency and effectiveness, and I think that's really what the watchwords need to be for next year.
What would you say to people? I've talked to some who are scared of AI and say, hey, this is still a people business, right? It's people talking to people. It's probably the most common thing I hear. What would you say to those people that are scared of it?
I think a lot of times when I talk to people and I say, what are you scared of? And they said, it's going to replace the human being. And I said, well, let's talk about, there's 2 aspects of sales. There's transactions and there's interactions. So what are transactions? It's rapid, repetitive, routine. I want to buy, I was just buying a couple of new coffee mugs. I don't want to talk to a salesperson. I want to go to Amazon, hit a button, buy the 2 mugs that I want. That's a transaction. What are interactions? They're protracted, they're complex, they're value add. So I think that's really where AI absolutely will take over transactions. AI will augment the human being for interactions. And I think that's the distinction people need to understand is AI has a lot of things that it can do really well, like calculate and crunch numbers. It does not have judgment. So yeah, trust is still going to be part of sales going forward. But if it's going to give me more information to say, look, you can trust that this is going to work because here are all the other things you need to know. And I think that's really where AI can supplement and enhance the contacts and the conversations that buyers and sellers have and really get up into that collaboration and, in fact, co-creation of solutions together. You know, I don't want to be sitting across a desk from my prospect. I want to be sitting on the same side of the desk.
You mentioned earlier, make an informed decision to not use it.
Yes.
So if I'm an enterprise sales leader who hears the message and says, okay, maybe I need to go get smart. What's a good place to go get smart? I mean, AI is such a broad subject.
You know, there are a lot more resources out there and a lot of research coming up. I noticed that Salesforce at Dreamforce was talking about SalesBlazerm. It's a new community that they've started, and where they're doing blogs on how AI is being used, giving case study examples. I think the real thing to do is realize that, like I said, there are over 400 people in our database who have an AI for sales component as part of their solution, and we don't have them all. I think what you need to do is first off go in and take a look and say, let's take a look at our entire sales process as it relates to the buying process, and where are we breaking down? Are we doing a really good job of generating interest? Or we're generating interest, but we're not doing a comprehensive needs analysis? Or we're doing a needs analysis, but we're not differentiating us versus the competition? Or we're not creating a sense of urgency? Or we're not selling value, so we have to rely on discounting and on and on and on. Go find out what the top problems are for you, and then go through and say, what would be the size of the prize if we solved that problem from low to high?
Yeah.
And once you've got that, you're going to sit there and say, I need to go have people who can help me at this aspect of customer lifecycle management. Then go take a look at the technologies. Because then you're going, if I go to somebody right now, you know, there are no AI for sales suites out there that deal with all things that, you know, a salesperson does, but there are really great solutions for pieces of what a salesperson does. And I think you have to go through and say, where's our biggest problem? And let's go do this, you know, one at a time. We're not saying boil the ocean and try to AI enable every aspect of the way you work with your customers, but you start with a couple of things, and then a couple of things, and then a couple of things, and eventually you're going to grow into a much more sophisticated sales organization that's better able to deal with the challenges today, but also look for opportunities for future growth with customers.
I know you just released some research on companies who feel they need improvement in those negotiate close phases and companies who are kind of above average. What was the impact on their business results for people who were better at that?
Yeah, we were really taking a look at, you know, like having people kind of rate themselves on how good are you at, you know, creating win-win negotiations for your clients and actually closing deals. And we found that if you do that, two things happen. Number one is the close rate goes up significantly because you are differentiating between the competition, you are creating a sense of urgency, you're doing all those things. And so your win rates go up. The other thing that goes up is the average deal size. Because you're able to go back in and show the person, you know, here's the payback of the things, here's what we should be looking at a 3-year agreement instead of a 2-year agreement, because you're answering all the questions and you're building that win-win case for the deal. And I think those are all things that, you know, if I'm looking for how do I increase revenues, I either need to sell more at the same price or I need to sell, you know, stuff at a higher price. And I think that's really things where you're having at the end of the sales cycle discussions, not at the beginning. You're not talking about, you know, discounting on the very first call, at least you better not be. You're talking about at the end. And if people are asking for a discount, it's because they don't see the value.
Yeah, you just posted about the red zone, and I'm actually not a huge fan of using sports metaphors in business, but I loved your article about the red zone. Can you overview a little bit about that?
Sure. The analogy in football is, you know, once you get inside your opponent's 20-yard line, did you score? Did you put any points on it? You're inside their 20-yard line, for God's sake. I equate that to the final phase of the sales cycle. I forecasted a deal. I'm in the red zone. Did I score or not? And when you take a look at, the teams that have like a really, really when I took a look at it this last time, I took a look at the teams that made the playoffs. And teams that made the playoffs had a red zone proficiency of around 70%. Teams that didn't make the playoffs had a proficiency of around 50%. So they're figuring out a way to get the ball across the goal line. And I think that's the type of thing that we should be taking a look at is what happens. If we're not executing, we're not, we're fumbling, whatever it is, those are all things that are impacting it. But, if we're really true to ourselves and we said this is a legitimate forecast deal, start thinking about being inside your opponent's 20-yard line and how are you going to punch it in and put more points on the board.
Jim, thank you for spending so much time with us on Close Mode, getting these insights into the future of what sales could be looking like. Knowing that the future is uncertain is remarkably helpful. If we don't know what's going to happen, being able to take control over what we do have available, over the numbers that we do have, controlling our close rates and focusing on the parts that we do have some accountability for, and maybe taking opportunities that are being presented to us through AI now, I think is a smart move for any sales manager and sales leader looking to make the most of 2024. So again, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure being with you guys.